And that was one way, because I teach in a public school, this was one way I could show them what God can do and God's people can do. And
Yeah,
so it would spark some interesting conversations out in the tomato fields.
that's so cool.
Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation.
God is glorified as we do what we do to honor him, and even gardening it can honor and glorify God. And one of those ways is, doing a garden that feeds the family and friends, but it can also be a ministry. So my guests today are husband and wife, Nick and Lindsay, and their daughter, Kate. And they ran a garden ministry at their church in the Chicagoland area for 7 years that also blessed local food pantries. So thanks for joining me, all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Can you just start with giving me an overview of how the garden ministry worked?
We had some space out behind the church where we were able to till it up and plant, and everybody, nobody at the church complained. We could do whatever we wanted. So we started with one plot the first year, and I think we went to two plots the next year, and I think it was probably the fourth year where we started to scale things up to three plots and then like six or seven plots,
Wow.
to where, and then we scaled back a little bit. And
We
Uh,
used drip irrigation,
okay.
and we put down fabric that would help prevent any weeds coming up so that we didn't have to worry about weeding. We set the water up on a timer so we didn't have to go out
Wow.
to water. But
Nice.
then we were out there really just for harvesting and kind of maintaining things. He had to do a lot of the maintenance stuff.
Gotcha. So, and obviously this is a lot of stuff to do during the summertime, spring as well, but you both have full-time jobs. Was there times where it was hard to maybe get out to the plots at the church while working your full-time jobs?
well, so going back to the other thing, we didn't get the drip irrigation and all of that, and probably till the fourth year. We were doing it just very old school the first
Yeah.
few years, where just planting from seed and all of that. But then started to think about how we could simplify things, and maybe
Mm,
even when we were trying to scale it up at the same time.
yeah.
But going back to your other question, though, it was, we both teach, Lindsay and I both teach where we have the summers off. So it wasn't too bad in the summer to find time, but we have to get things set up probably at the end of March.
Hmm.
So, and the season ends probably around, usually around Halloween, so somewhere in October, the end of October. So it wasn't difficult during the summer, but sort of the end of the school year and the beginning of the school year was, probably the beginning of the school year was especially stressful because that's when the harvest came in really heavy,
Yeah.
and trying to
Right.
coordinate all of that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So how big were these plots?
Uh, well, they varied in size, but the two that we stuck with the most were 30 feet. Yeah, we had a 30-foot by 90-foot plot and a 30-foot by 120-foot plot.
Wow.
Those were the 30 by 120 was the largest.
Okay.
So there was one year where we had two of the 30 by 120-foot plots and a 30 by 90-foot plot and two 30 by 60 plots. And then we had another one that I'm trying to remember the size. I think it was close to about 30 or 40 by 120. But really, it was just kind of 30 by 120. We had a couple
Mhm.
of those plots that we liked those the best, and it seemed to work out best in terms of being about the right size.
Yeah. Your church has a lot of space in the land.
We could have done more if
Wow.
If we would have had more help.
yeah, we could have scaled it up even more depending on how many volunteers and stuff we had.
Gotcha. So how many volunteers did you have?
Not a lot usually.
Were you doing a lot?
She was, yeah. We're out there a lot.
So sometimes it felt like there wasn't enough, but to be honest, we had just enough to be able to get it done, I think,
Okay.
reasonably. you can always have more, but we were able to get everything done 95% of the time
Mhm.
we wanted to. So we were able to get enough volunteers.
Did you have a specific day of the week per se that everybody gathered together to work, or just kind of coming out as you have time?
We had certain days that we had to drop off to the food banks, so that kind of would dictate when we could harvest.
Mm.
Well, I think it kind of worked the other way around. So yes, that's true. But we ended up setting up a distribution network to where we could drop off just about any day of the week. I think the only day we couldn't drop off, no, we could drop off just about any day of the week.
Okay.
If it was heavy, like when the tomatoes come in heavy,
Mhm.
there was really only 3 places that we could drop off to. And so then we had to kind of think ahead and look at the weather
Mm.
and try to line all of that. So yes, she's right that we had to line it up basically around that.
Yeah.
But we also had to line it up around the weather because you're not going to be able to get volunteers to go out there and pick when it's thundering and raining.
Right.
So it was, yeah.
We had to do that a couple of times.
We did do it in the rain a couple of times.
Sure, that wasn't fun.
Yeah.
So that brings up a question for me as far as I never thought that you could bring produce to food banks. So what kinds of things were they accepting? Is that generally a thing that they accept as far as produce or not, or because you were doing it on a bigger scale?
Well, it depends. There's some of the food banks where they only have the canned and non-perishable stuff,
Okay.
and we just left them out of our distribution network because that wouldn't work for us.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it was hard the first few years to get that distribution network up, just because there is like a website where you can find phone numbers and stuff
Mhm.
for the food pantries and the food banks, but it's hard to get in contact with people to even see what times they're available to set that up,
Mm.
just because they might just be there once a week or once a month. And so
Gotcha.
just that was hard the first few years trying to get that set up.
Yeah.
But once we had that set up, it was much more streamlined,
Okay.
knowing exactly how much we could take to
Mm.
each location and where. But yeah, they were happy to. Some of the food pantries said that was basically all they had that week
Wow.
was what we brought.
Huh.
Yeah, we did a lot of tomatoes, green
Okay.
peppers, lettuce, kale.
I think every year we did tomatoes just because
Every
it's
year.
really hard to mess up tomatoes. And
Big ones or
and
cherry tomatoes?
uh,
We
All
did
of it.
lots of different bigger ones. The
Okay.
cherry tomatoes were difficult.
we were focusing on the larger tomatoes just because
Okay.
you don't want to go out there. I mean, so I think last year we put in probably 120 tomato plants, and we had put in. I mean, when things were a little bit larger, we probably put in closer to 200 tomato plants. So you don't want to go out there and spend 20 minutes on just a cherry tomato plant
Yeah.
and then have to go to the next one and the next one and the next. So we focused on the larger tomatoes.
Hmm.
They're easier to transport too. Sometimes the farmer who was setting up our plants for us would accidentally put in a cherry tomato, and we just let it go or let
Okay.
the kids eat it, just because there's so much effort for so little return.
Yeah.
It's fine in your own garden, but not at this scale to
Yeah.
pick all of that.
Right.
So,
So how many food pantries or banks were you like servicing or dropping food off to?
just the number, or like the specific ones, or
Just the number.
I think we had probably 8 to 10
Wow.
that we were dropping off at.
That's
so
amazing.
so I think there was probably 4 of them in Kankakee. There was one or two in Bourbonnais, depending on the year. There was one in Manteno. There was one in Bradley. We even started to reach out last year to Moments a little
Mhm.
bit, as well as Beecher, I think.
Okay. Wow.
A couple in Beecher.
That's awesome.
And there were other groups. So those were just the food pantries. There was in Manteno, there was an interfaith grocery distribution that we would help out with. So this was to help out families that were on hot lunch assistance,
Okay.
but they didn't really have anything in the summer. So this was like a food pantry to help them out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we would we would drop off to that. So there were some years of when we could coordinate where we'd drop off to Mops and Moms Next as well within
Yeah.
the church. So but the food pantries, it was about 8 to 10.
Okay. Wow. So how did you guys start this? I mean, was this something that your family just has a passion for and you just talked to the church and began it? Or how did this become kind of a passion project for you guys and a way to serve not just your church, but the communities?
Well,
We'd never really, we're not farmers. We weren't really gardeners. We kind of had small gardens at home, but
Yeah.
then we started doing more.
I guess so. So one year we decided just very late, it was probably May,
Okay.
that why not grow tomatoes and peppers in our backyard? So we
Mhm.
put in like 10 plants and we didn't really know what we were doing. But then we figured it out and said, well, we wanted to help out at like the food banks and stuff. Well, why not see what they need for as far as help?
Yeah.
And it looked like they were lacking in produce,
Hmm.
like in vegetables and fresh vegetables and fruit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I guess not very bright, just thinking, well, we know how to plant stuff, so you just do it on a larger scale and it'll all work out just fine.
Yeah.
And I guess it's true to some extent, but when you scale things up to that size, there's a lot more challenges than
Yeah.
than just a handful of plants in your backyard. So
Mhm.
I don't know a lot because they started when I was like 2 years old. So
You've probably learned a lot though since then, right?
no.
Well, you've gotten
You
to
know how to
watch a
pick
lot.
which ones. And
Yeah, I want to.
So, how much time do you think, especially during the summers, were you spending out there each week?
Probably like two. Like
it was when we scaled it up and we had as many plots as we could probably fit, 6 or 7 plots, I think. No, 6 plots.
Uh-huh.
It was too much
Yeah.
where we had to be out there 3 days a week,
Wow.
and just I'm talking about when we're harvesting.
Yeah.
So when we're harvesting, so this is probably starting in July. Have to get out there very quickly after work, probably about 4 o'clock, and just to have enough time to be able to harvest everything. Sometimes into the dark, it'd get
Wow.
dark around 8:30.
Yeah.
So trying to do that 3 times a week after you get out of work and then trying to figure out how to line up. Well, it wouldn't fit in one car at that point. So it would take 2 or 3 cars that you
Wow.
completely fill up to take it. And it ended up being too much and too stressful. And that's where we started to scale things back to where,
Mhm.
just 2 plots was more reasonable,
Yeah.
where if there's no help at all, it's probably 3.5 hours for a single person to do. But
Mhm.
if you harvest, but if you get a handful of people to help, you can be done in an hour and a half or so.
Yeah.
usually it was like 3 to 4 hours. It was.
Did you do a lot of help during that time?
No.
she,
Yes, you did.
they did a lot of picking and then helping take care of the ones that were rotting, which
Mm.
they didn't like having to do that.
No. The only reason we did it is because we got ice cream there.
Well, the rewards make it fun sometimes.
Yeah,
Sure,
you
that
have to get the
tasted
bad
real
ones out of
good.
there.
Yeah.
So that's not always the fun part of the job, but it
Yeah.
just helps.
That's why you made us do it.
Well, we were all doing it, but
You got ice cream though. So, do you have any specific stories of how God blessed someone through this? Maybe from the food pantry's perspective, or maybe they told you a story of someone who did get to have fresh produce that otherwise wouldn't.
you have something. Oh,
I know when we would pull up sometimes in the Kankakee, there'd be people who were waiting.
Mm.
They would see us coming and they were like, we're waiting for the tomatoes because we know they're going to be fresh and good. And
Yeah.
they're hearing, and then just seeing like the families that some of the stuff that gets donated is not real fresh.
Mhm.
So seeing them just appreciate that it came right from the garden to their tables, and they
Yeah.
were excited about that, not having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times at that same location, I think she's talking about, they would have a favorite tomato because we would grow heirloom tomatoes
Mhm.
where I don't know if you're familiar with what those are at the
They're
grocery store.
like the original, right?
The
Original
heirloom,
variety?
they're like different colors.
Oh,
They're like
okay.
There's a lot of
Gotcha.
different
purpley,
colors and
green.
different shapes to them
Okay.
and stuff. So most grocery stores, you'll be able to see them in the middle of the summer if you
Okay.
look for heirloom tomatoes. And they're usually about $5 a pound. So they're a bit more expensive, but it doesn't
Mhm.
cost anything. It doesn't cost any extra to grow them. So we were doing the good ones.
Yeah.
But they would say they like the rainbow ones or,
Yeah.
the purple Cherokee ones that are like this purplish brown color when they ripen.
Yeah. That's cool.
And then at the end of the season, when we just harvest everything, like green tomatoes and everything, the families that would get excited because they could do fried green tomatoes then,
Oh,
that's neat. It's
yeah.
something that they had a tradition with from way back with their grandparents, and now they could do
Yeah.
it. That was neat to see too.
The annoying thing was that
You're supposed to talk about positive things.
well, me and my sister asked like 3 years straight when we would stop, and you kept on saying yes, and we finally stopped. Probably.
Okay.
So, you've seen how this has blessed a lot of food pantries and blessed community members. How would you suggest, or what would you suggest to someone who wants to start this up at their church or start it up as a ministry where they have land to do this?
I think what made it work out best is if you can have a person or a family that is involved in every single aspect of it.
Mm.
It's almost like if like my dad's in construction, he talks about how when people are setting up the house, the electrician wants to get in there first.
Mm.
Or the electrician or the plumber or the HVAC guy, they all want to get in first because then they just do whatever they want and they don't think about the other person and how everything interacts.
Yeah.
And so you can run into that a little bit if things are disconnected.
Yeah.
So I think it would be best if you don't have a guy just involved in one, a guy or a family or a girl involved in one part and
Yeah.
another person, another is just, one person or one family just does the whole thing, distribution, as well as setting things up, planning,
Yeah.
the whole thing. At that point, once you realize how things are work, you can sort of split off the different tasks.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have a person or a family that knows like the entire how
Yeah.
everything fits together for it to
Right.
work well, I think.
Gotcha. No, that's good. As you kind of, what would the right phrase be? But as you kind of retire from doing this for the past 7 years, what do you think you'll miss the most?
I don't know I haven't really thought about it yet, just because we would be setting things up
Mm-hmm.
probably at the end of the month. We would
Yeah.
start, and I didn't enjoy that part, to be honest. At the beginning,
It's a lot of heavy work at the
Yeah.
beginning.
and you're out there and so you're setting things up, and then it's windy sometimes, windy and cold, but the
Mhm.
wind sort of tears up some of the things that you're working on. So I don't miss
Mm.
that aspect of the setting it up. But once we get things set up, it was enjoyable. Or even throughout the season, I think it was enjoyable trying to work with all of the different families and volunteers
Yeah.
and interacting with them, and as
Yeah.
well as just being able to interact and see all the different people, the workers at the food pantries, as well as sometimes running into, I guess, I don't know what you call the customers or
Yeah.
the recipients at the
Yeah.
food pantries as well.
Right.
I'm gonna miss being able to like have conversations while we're harvesting, like amongst the rows, and you
Yeah.
could be talking to someone on the other side of the tomato plants, the rows, and just talking about things throughout your week, your day. I teach high school. I would have my NHS, my National Honor Society students come out and help harvest, and just
Mhm.
students who aren't even in NHS, they would hear what we do and they'd want to volunteer, and they would come out and do that. And that was one way, because I teach in a public school, this was one way I could show them what God can do and God's people can do. And
Yeah.
so it would spark some interesting conversations out in the tomato fields.
That's so cool. I love that. Kate, do you think you'll miss anything?
This isn't really about the garden
Okay.
because it was like next to it. Me and my sister, like, there was like a tree and it had these like saps, like ball, like things on it, and we
Sap
would
coming out of
pop
it?
it. And then my sister would make stuff out of it, and then I didn't like it.
So you'll miss those
Climbing
memories.
trees, just being outside.
Yeah.
I think.
There was a big tree swing, and all the kids would play
Play.
around, or they would bring their rollerblades and go in the parking lot if they're not helping,
Yeah.
or they'd climb up an apple tree and get a bunch of apples.
Gotcha. Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
good,
thank you,
good
guys.
memories.
Yeah.
And then me and my sister had like this tree that was like a little tree that we climbed. And then somebody chopped it down.
Oh no, that's sad. You could plant another one. Well, thank you guys for how you've blessed so many people and communities. And I hope that this wisdom will get to be shared. And for anyone who's listening who might potentially want to do this, they'll have a little bit more knowledge to work off of and to start this for themselves and other communities. So thanks for your time, all you guys, and for sharing what God has done through 7 years of gardening through ministry.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.